Hello, everybody, for the third time. Video number 3 for Wednesday, March 25th. I should have had a nap before I did this video, but I got the date right. Okay, so today we're going to talk about the literature review. We're going to take a look at a structural guideline for the intro and the literature review, and then we'll take a look at a sample. We'll talk about things that sample is doing well. And this was a sample from a CRP last semester that got 147 out of 150, so they did really well. So this is a pretty good example of what lit review can look like when it's doing a good job. So take a second to pause this video and download those two files from the folder for Wednesday, week 10. It'll be the lit review example and then the CRP intro and lit review template. Okay, now that you've got that in front of you, let's take a look first at the template. Pardon me while I adjust my very, very lo-fi setup here. Okay, so in the top left you see here the team name and then your actual names, the date of the course, word count, so that information that should always be there. Title, as always, maybe less room for creativity per se in this assignment since it's a bit more of a formal one, but you should have an informative title that's matching the prevailing tone of the paper, something that's engaging. And then you're moving right on to the first part of this paper that comes before the lit review, the introduction. But don't just call it introduction. Come up with some kind of subtitle that is going to explain maybe the trickiness of this problem or a paraphrase of the problem. And I've broken down this first section into two subsections, starting with the problem and then going to the research plan. So this is kind of looking a little bit like the iSearch, having that duality there. So starting with the problem, this can be 1 or 2 paragraphs. Feel out that length with your group mates, and keep in mind that you can always adjust that as you finish drafting the other sections of the paper, and maybe you want to go a little bit longer or a little bit shorter. But some things that you should definitely do in part 1, hook your reader's attention. And this may be a little bit different from the ways that you've hooked your reader's attention in the past, because again, the tone of this paper is a bit more formal. But things that you can do, maybe use a rhetorical appeal if you're writing about, for example, the opioid addiction. You can use some kind of appeal to pathos that makes this problem seem really important. Maybe some explanation of the problem that accomplishes that. Sometimes you'll see as a hook kind of a shift in the sentence flow, so a few like briefer sentences that kind of have like a kinetic effect. But talk about that with your group mates. Maybe you have an open discussion about how you want to hook your reader's attention in an email or a Snapchat or however you're communicating. Offer next your overarching question. So maybe that's already in the title and you're repeating it, or that's fine. Maybe you're saying it for the first time. Move into those sub-questions. Offer an acknowledgement of why this is an important issue to be reading about in the first place. And then finish with a thesis statement that in one sentence explains the answer to your big question. And obviously this is something that you can come back to after you've finished drafting your paper and doing all of that research. Next, your research plan. I say this is 1 to 2 paragraphs on the template. It may be less than that, but tell me about what sources you're going to try to find, where you're going to try to find them. Take another look at your intro for the iSearch, maybe to give yourself a refresher on how you did that the first time. And after you've done your introduction, this could be as many as 4 paragraphs or over a page and a half, you're getting into the lit review, which is the main section of this paper. And again, a literature review is a type of writing seen in a paper like this, a research paper, where you get yourself and your reader up to speed on what the experts in the world are saying about these questions and these topics. So I've taken as an example in this template here some of the sub-questions that maybe you've done if you looked at the flood of dilemmas problem. But this is just, again, an example for anyone to look at and learn from. So your lit review should be guided by your research questions, your sub-questions, not necessarily by the sources that you're finding. So for example, you could start with erosion. And this kind of matches up with the example too, so you can kind of click back and forth with that other file. Let's say your first sub-question had to do with erosion. You want to have a background source. Remember that BEAM, that BEAM acronym, a background source that's telling you what erosion is. Everyone has kind of an idea of what erosion is, but maybe you don't know what an ecologist's actual definition of that might be. And then you're moving to maybe a couple sources that might be used as exhibit sources that are telling you how erosion might work in a specific kind of ecosystem, like at the Southwest Desert. And then maybe you're synthesizing two more sources that are talking about ways that people combat that. Again, that synthesis term is the most important term for this section of the paper. It's where you're comparing and contrasting more than one source, 2 or even 3 at a time. Okay, yes, and if I had an iPad and I could like circle this file digitally, I would circle that word synthesis. And I would really, really hound my group mates about trying to achieve that, because it's maybe the main thing that I'm going to be looking for when I grade your paper. Talking about 2 or 3 sources at once and comparing and contrasting them. So let's go over to the sample here. I've excised just a literature review from a team last semester that did a great job. Let's take a look at the first paragraph here in a bit of detail, because it's exhibiting some good things. So they've just got the header literature review, which is fine. You don't have to come up with a creative title for this section. It can just be called literature review. And we get a little topic sentence here. The root of our problem stems from the introduction of an invasive species. Perhaps unintentional wordplay here with root and stem and invasive plants and stuff, but maybe that's just my creative writing brain. Okay, and then we move pretty quickly into a background source from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, giving us a definition of what an invasive species is. That's a great thing to do first here. Then they have a nice transition sentence where we see, this definition presents a reasonable base of knowledge about invasive species, but we need specifics. This brings up a good point, that they're using the pronoun we. I want you to steer clear of the pronoun I. I don't want any kind of singular pronouns here, because this is written by a group. Even if you did write separate sections, always use a we, an our. Okay, and then after that transition sentence, they go into an exhibit source, giving information about specifically the negative aspects of invasive species. And that is great. And next paragraph here, they're relating this new knowledge here to their specific scenario. They're mentioning the Big Gorge River here. You don't necessarily have to mention place names or fictional names from your scenario in your paper. You can use real situations here. So they could have used like the Verde River, for example, which runs through Arizona. Okay, let's see if we can find some synthesis here. So in this next paragraph, there is a good, actually the paragraph at the end of page 2 has a good example of synthesis here, where you see, I wonder if you can take a second to pause the video and see if you can find it. It's in the paragraph that begins, despite noble human intentions. And I see it in the sentence that says, Kevin Hultin similarly illuminates negative implications the invasive tamarisk can have on an ecosystem, and then follows with a quotation from that source. And don't skimp on such sentences. In fact, this, even though they did well in this literature review, they could even have more going on here. Consider your sources to be very, very lonely, needy people, and they never want to be by themselves. Okay, and I've included the works cited here, just to give you like yet another kind of visual about what a good works cited page can look like. Okay, so that's our video on those 2 files, which should hopefully be helpful for you. I would like you to email me or share with me your literature review draft by Monday. I'm going to put this in the reminders or announcements tab at the bottom of this folder. Not for a grade, not even necessarily for kind of like official feedback, but just so I can see how you're going, if I can give you any advice, and to give you kind of like a milestone for getting a certain amount drafted. So I would like to see that shared with me by Monday. So communicate with your group mates, send them an email, who's going to finish what, who's going to be the one who shares that with me. It only needs to be one person. So let this be an opportunity for you to work on that communication stuff. And if you have any issues with communication with your group mates, please, please, please send me an email and let me know. It's best to let me know about such issues as soon as possible rather than later, so I can help you work on it. And yes, word of the day. Let me check my book here. I know I forgot to do it yesterday, so there's just not going to be a word of the day for that day. All right, bear with me. Skip ahead in the video. All right. Word of the day is torque. Let me write this down and spell it for you. I'm going to be more on top of the word of the day here. I'll have it ready to go in fancy calligraphy. Torque. And it was pointed out to me last video that it looks reversed to me, but ends up being fine. Okay, third video done. We're 3/4 of the way through first online week. So, have a great day.